Thanks so much for joining us. I want to just a couple of just housekeeping things to help this go smoothly and be a better experience for you guys. What we're going to do is we're going to just invite all of you to keep yourselves muted for the entire time that Susan is talking, and then we're going to open up a Q&A a little bit later in about 40 minutes or so. We're going to do a Q&A, and we'll bring everybody on at that time. In the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, on your phone, you can just swipe left or right if you're on your phone, but I think most of you are on a desktop or laptop. So what you would do in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see either speaker view or grid view written up there. It's a better experience for you while Susan is sharing if you have it in speaker view. That means that the screen is going to be large for whoever is speaking rather than the Brady Bunch, okay? So there's this, you can toggle between the two. In the upper right hand corner, you'll see the difference if you click on speaker view or if you click the little boxes and it goes to grid view. So that might help your experience be a little bit better. We are recording this. We will put it in our Facebook group at some point. Melinda is still trying to get the live to work, and we'll keep doing the best we can. For some reason, I think maybe it's the overload of everybody trying to do Zoom and all of that, but we certainly are excited to have you guys here. We're happy to have Susan Hanna with us. Susan is part of our face-to-face ministries team. She's actually our lead intercessor, and we are very honored to have her. She's got some amazing experience from working with community trauma, and that is the category that disasters and global pandemics fall into. She has experience with working in the aftermath of 9/11, living in New York City at the time. She's also done some relief work and counseling and just helping communities heal after community trauma, like wildfires that destroy your town or portions of it here in California where we live. So I'm trying to get the live going here, and it's just not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. We have the wheel of death over here, but hopefully we'll keep working on that, but we don't want to take any more time from Susan. And so if you guys want to toggle into speaker view, and then we're going to ask you to keep yourselves muted. And now Susan is going to come on and start sharing some wisdom about what we're all experiencing right now and how we can heal as a community from that. So Susan, are you there and are you ready?
I am.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, if some of you are new to the term community trauma, that's just kind of a term that we've coined. Like she said, I've kind of avoided the term disaster in all of this. Disaster raises up all kinds of, I don't know, the term disaster itself can be traumatizing because we think of things like wars and fires and that sort of thing. But I like the term community trauma, and it's different than individual trauma in that the focus of impact. Everybody who's impacted by a trauma in both science, society, and I think scripture even reveals that all of those that are a part of the wounding are also part of the healing. So I've tried to think, so usually like if it happens in a city or a town, like she said, I was in New York City during 9/11, and I was hired a week before 9/11 to start a week after 9/11 at a compassionate ministry center right in Midtown Manhattan. And at that time, I was living in a hospital, participating in a medical study at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, and also volunteering and working in the children's hospital that was attached to it at that time. So I had like a week and a half living in a hospital with all these healthcare workers and people impacted by the trauma. And then immediately after was thrust into a new place to live and job, all in the same building in Midtown Manhattan, where we really focused on a variety of things that I won't go into at this time. But I remember the day I was on the 10th floor. I remember the day that the first plane hit the Twin Towers. I remember what I was doing. I remember who I was with. I remember going back and forth between the window and my room, which was actually a hospital room, and other people going in there with me and watching on TV and going back and forth and watching on the window. I remember thinking, this isn't really happening. I remember thinking, we're at war. I remember this isn't real. We became obsessed with the news. We're watching all the time. So there was lots of the kinds of things that hopefully you're hearing. Some of those same kinds of things are the kinds of things that we are experiencing now, and that some of you guys have experienced. And like I said, a key part in dealing with the community trauma then, and then when I got out into the city, there was a grief that so enveloped the city. And at that time, we didn't have as much social media. There were posters everywhere, people saying, one with faces of people looking for their loved ones. And the grief in the city was just overwhelming. Well, as the healing process progressed, disasters or community traumas have a very studied, logical cycle or series, phases. Disasters have phases. And during that first phase, well, first there's that kind of the initial impact, which is pretty blow. Then there's a phase where everybody's kicking in and they're doing stuff. And then there's other phases, and I won't go into those right now. But ultimately, in those early stages, when there's lots of help needed, help comes from outside, and it needs to come out from outside, just like when our physical bodies are really traumatized, we have to go to a doctor, we have to get help from outside of ourselves. But in the long-term health and recovery, all of those involved, all of those impacted need to be a part of that healing process. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. We're not going to be able to hit a lot of that because right now we're in the initial stages of this, which is impact. And so I think it's important for us to look at the impact. The impact of this trauma as far as the community is really the whole world. And I thought, when have we ever, everybody keeps saying this is so unprecedented. And the only like thing that's impacted the whole world as far as a healing of a trauma that I can remember, we are reading some things in history of other pandemics and stuff, but I'm remembering the AIDS crisis, especially in the 90s, early 2000s. And that was something that impacted the whole world. And early on, we didn't know a lot about it. There was a lot of things around it. And ultimately, if you remember, a big thing was we are the world. And it was a big AIDS, people from around the world gathering, and we're part of that healing process with that. So that's the one that comes to my mind as far as having this big of a community impact as far as being a whole world. An important part of, I just want to throw in at this point, why it's important for everybody that's been impacted by the disaster to be a part of the healing and the recovery is because that is what ultimately will help prevent us from having a victim mentality. One of the biggest things about some kind of a trauma is that some power has been taken away, we have been injured. And if we stay in that injured state and we are not a part of the healing, the recovery of that, then that's how we can get kind of stuck in a victim mentality. And we all know people who have been impacted by trauma who then kind of can get stuck in that victim mentality because they don't feel they have the ability, they have the power to do anything to change their situation or to change their lives. So that's one of the key components, I think, of why God designed us to be a part of our healing and recovery process, that it's not just something done to us, but something he does in cooperation with us and with all of those involved. I love lately, I've been hearing, I think Graham Cook coined the phrase that a new definition of grace is empowering presence, God's empowering presence. And I think that's a huge part of healing and recovery, is this empowering presence of God and him empowering us to do what we can do to change things. I want to hit just a few things on some of the things that I'm hearing and seeing that people are experiencing. When we get to the Q&A, I'm sure you guys have other ones. One of the things that I've been hearing a lot is people feel off balanced. They're feeling teary. Sometimes even the most stable among us, those who we just think of as our emotional rocks, you know, are having times where they're teary. We're emotionally, we're tired, you know, the mad, sad, or angry, tired, whatever that thing is, angry. We're tired. It's been going on a long time, and all of those things makes us more susceptible to being teary. And also, there is a grief. You know, grief has to do with unmet expectations. You know, we've expected something to be there. We've expected things to go a certain way, and they don't happen that way. And so there's a sense of loss. And so there is a grief. And I've enjoyed, Max Lucado has been doing some little moments every day, and I find he has been good about walking with people through the grief process. We have other people that are helping us in other ways, but I feel like he's been one that's been especially good at helping walk with the grief process. Of course, we're experiencing all of our emotions. We're experiencing loneliness, isolation, anger. Some people in the midst of trauma numb. They don't feel, and that's a way of coping too. That's a way of surviving. But the more, of course, that we can feel and in some way express our emotions while we're experiencing it, it's going to make the impact less down the road. As we all know, in this whole area of heart healing, it's when we haven't been able to process a trauma and process our emotions in the midst of something that we are much more likely than to suppress and have to deal with it at some point down the road. Because that's how God designed us. He made us feelers. God's a feeler. The fruit of the Spirit, I think, are God's emotions: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. Cognitively, it's hard to focus. And that's a real, very common thing for a lot of people. When we're dealing with stress, as I'm sure many of you know, whenever there's a stress over a period of time, well, first, even when there's an initial impact of stress, there's all these stress hormones that are going off in our body that kick us into fight, flight, or fright, fight, flight, or freeze. When we've got all those hormones and all of those systems in our body that are kicking in, and it gets us working in the back part of our brain that's more operates on that physical, instinctual level and less on our cognitive front level. And so brain fog is really common, and brain fatigue. And we are such an, especially in Western society, we're so intellectual and we so think everything and are so information oriented. So if we're spending a lot of time with the information, a lot of time with the media, a lot of time with our trying to process thinking wise, when we're back here, that it doesn't work good. And so people, I'm just not myself. I'm usually, I can be cool in a crisis, but I just am not myself. And there's that difficulty thinking. Something that's really helpful for this, it's old fashioned, but make the notes, write things down, keep goals simple, 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 simple. And short. This is not a time for making long lists. Sometimes the goal for some, depending on what we're going through, because some of us are sick, some of us have loved ones that are sick, some of us are losing jobs, some of us are dealing with children or spouses that we're not used to spending all this time together with. So keep your expectations simple. That's really important. I'm hearing about dreams and nightmares. Again, common. Both. God speaks to us in dreams. I'm the kind of person God speaks to us through many ways and many languages. He speaks to me a lot in dreams, but also dreams is that state where we can do a lot of our processing because our cognitive processors are having a hard time in our wake state. Old traumas are brought up. Anytime we have a new stress or trauma, an old trauma can be triggered by that, especially if it's an unhealed one. But sometimes even if it's a healed one, we'll still have the remembrances of it. Of course, I'm remembering 9/11 right now. I'm remembering being in the wildfires and right now because those were times that were very reminiscent of what I'm experiencing. So especially if people have had a lot of trauma in their life, the new stresses, the new trauma can trigger those old traumas. And this is why people that are therapists, pastors, natural caregivers, right now, they're busy. Their phones are ringing off the hook. Because a lot of this is reminiscent of that. And sometimes, especially if it's an unhealed, we don't even know where those emotions are coming from. And so they think, I should be just fine. I mean, I'm safe, I'm healthy, I'm not sick, but it's pulling something, an emotion from the past that makes it bigger than maybe your actual threat is. We're seeing stress in relationships. In every kind of way. We're also seeing relationships come together. We'll talk about the good stuff too, but right now I'm talking about, people getting on each other's nerves. There's the angriness. There can be even people who really like each other can be very uncomfortable. It was interesting. Last January, I went on a little retreat with two of my best friends. We went in a cabin up in the woods, and it was interesting. We had this discussion on our way back. Two of us are kind of more introverted, and one of us is more extroverted. And our friend that's more extroverted said, this is really good. She said, but I've been thinking, because the two of us were thinking, being alone in a cabin in the woods, we can write, we can retreat. This would be really cool. And she's saying, I don't think I could spend more than 3, at the max 5 days alone in a cabin in the woods. And I'm thinking, I don't think I could spend more than 3, 5 days max in a cabin with people in the woods for a long period of time. So again, we're all very different in what we experience, but I just thought it was so funny that we had that conversation, and now here I'm alone in a cabin in the city, but alone and isolated for a long period of time. And I think I can handle this well, but yeah, relationships are amplified. That's so true. Melinda brought up something this morning. She saw a new phenomenon that other traumas, we haven't seen this before, and that is Zoom stress. And she talked about how you know, we're so used to, or we relate to each other in a presence way, and are connecting with one another so much more than just seeing or hearing. And so we're having to really work hard. I mean, we communicate with all of our being. There's our physical vibes that we give off. There is our body positions that we give off. There's eye contact. You know, I can't make eye contact. I make eye contact with this camera, but I don't see you and you don't see me. All of those things that are a natural part of communication and really connecting with another person. Well, now we're doing that on Zoom a lot. And by doing that, we're having to kick in and work harder at processing and communication, and that it's causing fatigue. And so maybe Melinda can post later that that link that she saw on that, because I thought it was really interesting that she brought that up. And of course, a big one is tiredness. People are just tired. Their stress wears you out. Stress it causes fatigue. So realize that a lot of times we have really ambitious goals, or there's things we want to do, and you're just feeling like, I can't do all the things I want to do. I'm just sitting around all day. I should be able to do this. I should be able to keep my house clean. I should be able to do this. I should be able to exercise. I should be able to do that project that I've been wanting to do, but we're so exhausted, and we need to be so gentle with ourselves, because we need to realize that just those stress hormones are exhausting, and that we all deal with things in different ways. Going back to kind of our basic fight, flight, or freeze, because that is kind of the three basic strong things whenever there's a trauma that we kick into. And I'm thinking of where we see fight. We see people angry with the government. You've seen people on the media that are angry and pushing. They're angry at people that leave their gloves in the parking lot, and they're angry at the police, and they're angry at the president, and they're angry at the governor, and they're angry at the dog, and there's that. They just want to fight, and some people are fighting against the injustice, and that's the way they're made. And some people in a crisis, that's what they do, is they fight. Some people in a crisis, the fear gets the best of them, and the fear we're seeing in the hoarding. We're seeing it in a lot of the anxiety kinds of issues. We're having panic attacks, and we are having anxious thinking, a hard time, our thoughts going round and round and round, thinking about what if I lose my job, or what are we going to do financially, what if kinds of thinking, people becoming extremely obsessive with cleanliness and with wanting to protect themselves, and kind of almost becoming OCD. And then there's the freeze. And for me, freeze looks like, I want to stay under the covers. Just wake me up when this is over. It is, I just want to sleep. I would like to just not deal with this. And maybe if I just stay here, if I can just check out long enough and endure it and not do anything, it'll be over. So that's some of the ways that I think that looks like. one of the things when I want to go, before I step into some things that I think are really helpful that to keep in mind. When I was working in with survivors of the wildfires in Northern California, I was a FEMA worker, a crisis counselor, but we worked through a social service agency, a Catholic social service agency. And they had done a lot of work previously in the community with something called ACEs. And some of you have probably heard of this, some of you haven't. It came out of a study actually started by a doctor wanting to get to the root causes of some diseases they were having a hard time getting really addressing, like obesity, and that they were seeing kind of pandemic things of diseases that are very related to stress hormones. And what they started seeing and discovering was that a lot of people that had these chronic diseases that they were really having a hard time getting help with were people who had childhood traumas. Or childhood, adverse childhood experiences. That's what ACEs stands for. It took me a second there. I wrote down ACEs, but I didn't write down what it stands for. Adverse childhood experiences. And basically they found and identified that there were 10 different kinds of adverse childhood experiences that affected health and also affected children's ability to operate in school, all these different things that they were seeing that affected people across a lifetime. They could identify, like, there were actually 10 different adverse childhood experiences. They were things like abuse, hunger, an absentee parent. There's actually 10 different things that they've discovered. Okay, these things really affect children, and it's going to affect them across a lifetime. And so the whole idea behind this is, okay, so let's start doing ACE scores on people. You get 1 point for each one of these 10 childhood experiences that you've had. And the higher the scores are, and we're aware of that in children, let's start doing some interventions in schools, and let's start doing interventions and things to help create health and safety. So that we're not seeing as much of this down the road in things like addictions and obesity and all these other different stress-related diseases. So the reason I bring all of this up is, like I said, they found people that had these adverse childhood experiences. It affected them physically and health-wise over the long term. But on the flip side of that, children that experienced these adverse experiences, when it came to crises in life, when it came to things like this, these were the people that were on the front lines. They had learned things like flexibility. They had learned to operate under stress. They had learned to be flexible. They had learned creative ways to get around things and to make things happen. And so the very people that have all of these maybe health issues later on, because of their adverse experiences, they developed muscles, they developed an ability to respond to stress. And they became, in a sense, those that could operate well under bigger stresses and more longer term stresses. And they were the ones that are good in a crisis. And that's why a lot of times you're going to see crisis workers, crisis healthcare workers, firemen, a lot of times people in the area of counseling and social work, like me, I have a high ACE score, are the very people that you're going to find in the helping professions, because they're good in a crisis. But of course, if some of those traumas haven't been healed, in the long term, it's going to have a big effect on our bodies. But that's the flip side of this, that those are the very people that are strong in a crisis. Now, the reason I bring this up is when we now are in our stress, when we are in a big stress, this is an opportunity. And so this is something you can take with your kids and in our own lives to develop our muscles, as it were, to be creative, to be flexible. These are the kinds of trainings that you can do with your children that are training them to handle difficulties and stress in life. I think of where Paul said, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance." It's sort of like weight training, muscle training. So this is an opportunity, Chinese, I'm sure some of you have probably heard of this, the Chinese character for crisis is danger and opportunity. It's those two characters together. And in every crisis, there's both danger and there's opportunity. And so that's the flip side. And of course, as Christians, we're always looking at that flip side because we believe in a loving God who is always working. Romans 8:28 is my life verse. It's a tried and true promise for me. In everything, God is working together for my good. And in every trauma and every struggle, he can work something really good here. And so that's just a takeaway of one of the things that can and is part of, I think, a good attitude to have in the midst of a stress. And again, too, it's also helping us, preventing us from moving over into that victim mentality. Because if we are not finding those creative ways, if we are not finding ways to survive, if we are not building our muscles, then that means we're in helplessness. And then we can get into hopelessness, and then we can get into despair. And that's where we can spiral down and can get into real trouble. Okay. So, I guess I wanted to say that with the ACE scores things, that so the people that have those ACE scores become, as it were, the salty sailors that can endure and weather the storms when we're in a ship that's being tossed to and fro, which is what this feels like. Which reminds me too of another story I want to tell you. When a number of years ago, I was, I guess in my 30s, I was a youth sponsor, an adult sponsor on a youth trip. And we were going across country to a conference, and on the way we spent a day doing a whitewater rafting trip. Whitewater rafting was not on my bucket list. I'm not addicted to the stress. I like the cool and the calm. And of course, it ended up being like a 4-hour trip or whatever. And of course, they spend time training you on what to do and how, and our guides, of course, that are going to be in the whitewater raft with us, they've done this a million times. And to them, it's not threatening. To me, and to some of the kids, of course, they're like, yeah, and others they're afraid. And as they were prepping us for it, telling us what to do, and of course, the biggest thing is if perchance you get thrown out of the raft, this is what you do, and this is how you survive, and we'll take care of you. And of course, there was not a real threat. There's some threat, but these guys are so experienced, they can fish you and get you out. But I put it in my head. I thought, my goal on this whitewater rafting trip is I will not, under any circumstances, get thrown from the boat. That was my goal. And you know how on a raft they have the rubber buoys and then the floor, but the floor is attached, but there's space in between so the water can flow in and out of it. And I'm way up in the front of the boat, which if you've been whitewater rafting, you know, then that's where all the water comes in. There are times we went under the water and the water's going over. But I got a hold of one of those hand holds, and I put my foot, I planted my foot between the floor and the inner tubing type stuff. And I hung on, and I was determined, I am not going to get thrown from the boat. And I did not get thrown from the boat. I got drowned, I got drenched, and I hung on for dear life, but I didn't get thrown from the boat. And I say that to say we all respond in different ways in this, when we're in a whitewater raft, which is what we're doing. And some of us, our goal just needs to be, and especially during the impact phase, is I'm not going to get thrown from the boat. We're going to dig in with whatever resources we have, and we're going to dig in, and we're not going to get thrown from the boat. Of course, some people are going to be this is our time, let it shine. They're the ones that are prophesying on Facebook. They're the ones that are reaching out to their neighbors. They're doing there's those that are going to operate like that because that's who they are. There are going to be those that are going to direct everything, like the guy in the back of the boat. There's going to be those that lift up their hands and just are in it for wow, we're going for it, up for the ride. But however and whoever we are, that's what we've got to get through this. And so, again, it's really important. And one of the important things I want to say about the surviving through, the getting through this, is it's really important that whatever tools you use, whatever tools are helpful for you, what works for you, what has worked for you in the past, what is consistent with your personality, use it. That's your strength. Go for it. As long as it's not hurtful to yourself or to others. Use the things that God has equipped you, because God's equipped us all for whatever He's given us. He's given us all the tools we need to go through what we go through in life. And if we need more equipping, we can ask Him for it. We can learn things, but it's going to be consistent with who we are. But it's so very, very important. And this is something that we do that's really destructive to community, is that when we're in the midst of a stress, we do not push our way of dealing with it onto other people. That those that are hanging on for dear life, that their goal is just to get through and they can't do anything else. And your way of dealing with things is, I set a goal. If you were a goal-oriented person before this and that got you through things, chances are you're goal-oriented through this. You're gonna organize that craft room. You're going to exercise every single day. You're going to do whatever. If that's what you did before that got you through things, then that's what you're going to do through this. Don't set for yourself, like, I'm not a great housekeeper. I like having a clean house, and I actually get somebody to help me right now. It is not my goal to clean and organize my house right now. That's adding a more stress. And when we push our way of dealing with things onto other people, that's just adding to their stress. It's going to stress your relationships more. It's going to make people more tired. So it's really, really important that whatever are the tools in your tool belt, whatever your strengths are, go with them, but please don't push them onto other people. The biggest help, both when I was in New York City and when I was in the wildfires, it was the craziest thing, but over and over again, I saw it. I saw it in the hospitals. I saw it among the firemen, and I saw it in California. We dealt with some schools that had been greatly impacted, and the same thing. And you know what it was that was the most impactful in helping people emotionally? It was a therapy dog. It was a therapy dog. And the deal about a therapy dog is trained to do one thing, and that's to calm. To calm, to help that person feel safe, safe and loved. That's what therapy dogs do. You're safe, you're loved. We're going to get you out of this danger. And some of us, I said during the whole, the wildfires especially, we had this gentleman with a therapy dog. He actually had worked a lot with vets with PTSD, and he trained PTSD dogs, therapy dogs. And even when he came into work among our counseling team, you know, just the dog being in the room, I mean, everybody just wants to touch it, just because that dog has that unconditional presence. He doesn't care about your stuff. There's no judgments. There's no whatever. There's that unconditional acceptance. This is what we need to have for one another. This, to me, is the empowering grace, this unconditional love of God. This is one of the most important things that we need to have. Parents that are dealing with their children, again, some parents are very organized and they're really on to this homeschooling kind of things. Other parents, this is really hard and this is stressful. Some try to be really structured, and some are saying, I just can't keep up with this structure. I can't do whatever. And we need to let go of doing it all perfectly. And I read this one article that was just so good. And it said, parents, the most important thing is at the end of the day, do your kids feel loved and do they feel safe? And I think that that's true for all of us. At the end of the day, for all of us, do we feel loved? Do we feel safe? And what can we do to make sure that we all feel loved, that we all feel safe? And if you have a dog, that's even better, man. But I said that was my job. I felt like that was my job during the wildfires. I went around and said, I think I'm a therapy dog. That's how God made me. God has consistently throughout my history, it just seems like I'm supposed to come alongside people and just love them and walk with them through tough times and just make them feel loved and safe. And I think the more that we can do that with each other, the better we are. Physically, dealing with anxiety, dealing with stress, there's things you can do. A huge one you hear all the time, but it's so true, is deep breathing. Kathy and Melinda have a peace toolkit that's got some wonderful tools, how to do an appreciation moment. But the most basic of things, one of the things that when we're stressed, we have a tendency to breathe very shallowly. We're not getting the oxygen we need. One of the biggest things is to just stop in through the nose, hold it, get that oxygen, hold it, blow it out through the mouth, doing deep breathing. And we do that in a meditative way, even with the Lord. And when we're training people just out in whatever we talk about, we are taking in the good air, the good stuff, and we're blowing out the bad stuff. So taking it in, the good, blowing out the bad, that's a big one. Physical activity. Again, not everybody can get into this. Some are going to be couch potatoes, and have grace for yourself if you're a couch potato through this. But it has been proven through history, through science, that the more physical activity you can do, again, that just helps release that toxic junk that's in our bodies, getting the sunshine, getting the fresh air. As much as one can have normalcy and a routine, that's going to help. A friend of mine years ago, she homeschooled all of her kids, and throughout all the years that she did that, and she did it in various ways as they got older so that they were still interactive with other kinds of schools. But throughout their years, early on, every day they had quiet time in their house for an hour. It was after lunch, and everybody had to go to their bedroom, go to their bed. They could take a toy with them or a book or whatever, but there was a quiet time that was set aside for rest or for meditation. And she started doing that with her children as preschoolers. It was a nap time for those. So if you wanted to nap, if mama wanted to nap, mama could nap. But she trained her children to do that, to have that quiet time. And of course, there's so much in scripture about quietness and confidence is our strength. And a huge part of this reset for all of us is coming to that quiet and a place of connection with the Lord. And that's part of, we want to be sure and not miss quiet and allowing for quiet and training your children in quiet. It'll serve them throughout their lifetime to have at least some space set aside every day to connect. And it's here in this place that the Lord can do the reset. I see we're getting close to where we need to wrap here so we can go to some questions. Let me just say one more thing again about let me say a few things that are helpful even in terms of community, and that they have found even in doing some of the work I have done has a lot been with war refugees. And some of the work that they have done are things like dancing and music are really important. And in a sense of community, our health, our safety, our well-being is found in being in rhythm and in tune with the people around us and the environment. And so, and music gets us into, again, different parts of our brains. Our brains are very rhythmic. And so music is a huge deal. And it's interesting in these children of war, one of the things they're doing is they are dancing. They're dancing. They put on happy songs and they are dancing and they are moving. And that's got that physical movement going on. And I remember it was a secular trauma teaching that I went to. It wasn't a Christian-based thing. And a lot, he was talking about how they've got this positive music. They've got these kids lifting their hands. They're dancing. And I thought, we've been doing that in the church for years. And I thought of where, the Lord says he'll turn our mourning into dancing. And what if actually dancing is part of the removing of the mourning? Anyway, that's one of the music, dancing, do things that you love, make time for things that you love. And then another big important thing is, as much as you can, don't let one day's stress go into another. Again, this is a teaching of Jesus, and it's one of the most healthy things that we can do. As much as you can, at the end of the day, try to give it over, give it back over, let it go, give that stress over the Lord. I have a number of other ideas here, but I don't want to take away from the question time. So I think at this point, let's just go ahead and go to questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan. Wow. Wow. And there's a lot of activity going on in the chat. I've been taking notes and sending them. You guys actually can tap on the three little dots in the bottom right corner and save the chat if you want for notes. But there have been a couple of questions that have strewn by. So I know where I'm going to start. Kathy Phillips had a question. That was weird.
Oh, that's outside.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
That was here.
That's okay. But Kathy, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question, and then mute yourself back when Susan answers, and then we'll just kind of, if you want to just raise your hand, unmute yourself and ask questions so we don't like talk over each other. So we'll try and do this orderly. And I do, there have been some resources that have popped up. Papa Joe and also Sue Badu have, they've both mentioned some things as resources in response to what Kathy was talking about. But Kathy, why don't you go ahead and have that conversation with Susan about the ACEs and stuff.
Hi, Susan.
Hi.
One of those people, like, honestly, when there's something, yeah, whenever there's a crisis, something awakens within me, literally. And so, and I'm one of those ACE people that had adverse childhood experiences, and I never understood, why am I like that?
Yeah.
I don't know, but now I know. That's
great. Awesome.
So, but my question is, how can we train our children to get these muscles without exposing them to the trauma in their childhood?
Yeah.
And it looks like somebody, Papa Joe, somebody put up a book called Building Bounce by Marcus Warner. So
yeah, the whole resiliency thing. Well, a key is in that training your children is that, of course, we will all have adverse experiences in our life at some level and at some time. And one of the things is that we help children navigate and take the time to train whenever those stresses come up, whatever they might be. One of my nieces in the lockdown business, she has 3 little ones at home. She's got from 3 to 8, I think. And she got her groceries at Walmart, the pickup, you call in and you do the pickup. Well, she ended up having to be in that car with those kids in the Walmart parking lot from like 3:30 to like 7:30 in the car with those kids. And she posted on Facebook in the middle of them making silly faces and stuff. But I mean, oh, bless this young woman's heart. That was an opportunity, and she was teaching. They were doing creative things. They were singing. They were making videos. She was doing everything in her toolbox for those kids. And I thought, way to go, Mama. So like right now, in the midst of this, these are perfect opportunities to teach your kids those things. This is what we do under stress.
Cool.
Yeah, and encourage and affirm what they do well. You know, help them identify what their tools are. You know, the creative one, or the introvert writer, or the, you know, whatever. Yeah, flexibility.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Sue, you want to mention you actually have written a book on this topic as well. Why don't you just share very quickly about that?
Oh, thank you. Great to see you. And thank you, Susan. I hope we can connect more, because it sounds like we've sort of lived parallel lives. So it's been really great. But yeah, I wrote a book and it's illustrated by my daughter. It's called Building Bridges of Hope. And it's all practical ideas of things adults can do with children.
Oh,
both
awesome.
if they already have experienced trauma, or if you're trying to build that resilience, even if they haven't. And it's, so it's got text pages on one side that give you those tips and ideas, and coloring pages on the other.
What is it called again?
Building Bridges of Hope.
Awesome.
And so it's in the form of a coloring book. So there's the coloring pages, and then the text pages give the practical ideas. And it's based on biblical principles, and also a lot of research and a lot of, you know, the science, the ACEs, and everything like that. So.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Sue. And anybody else have a question? You can just unmute yourself and ask. Robert, go ahead. Get yourself unmuted. There you go.
Yeah, it wasn't working for some reason. I wonder, listening to this, the crisis we're going through now, one of the differences, not to make it, well, it is big, it's bigger than these other things, is that a lot of the other things we deal with that are traumas in our life are what you would call, what is it, type B trauma, which is stuff that happens to you.
Right.
Whereas this trauma that we're going through is what Carl Lehman referred to as an absence trauma, because it's really not happening to us unless we've gotten sick, which God forbid. Right. But it's the taking away of everything.
Yes.
And that's part of the struggle. You know, I think sometimes when you're in those other types of trauma, you can be put into action because there's things to do related to the trauma. You know, if you have a fire, right, then you can clean up your house, or if you have a tornado, you can go try to pick up your trash or whatever. But, you know, with this, we can't even go feed people without, you know, reminding them of how we can't touch each other and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
It's just very different. And so that, I just wanted your thoughts on that, about the difference of this.
Yeah, it is very different. And like I said, that's even was part of me not wanting to use the word disaster, but it is a trauma, you know, it is an impact. And it is a stress. It's, in a sense, it's kind of like bullying. You know, it's kind of like being bullied. You know, there is something happening to us at which we can not feel powerful, and the whole idea, the big thing is what ways can we be empowered? Finding those ways. What can I do, Lord? What do you want to show me? What do you want to do through me? You know, it's really important to not allow ourselves to get into the bullied and the victim kind of mentality in it. And we're doing that different ways. Some people are taking risks that some of us might think, you're just going out too much and you should, you know, whatever. And I've learned that I have some friends that are doing that, and it's like, I need to not judge them. I don't know, you know, that's their way of being proactive, but finding those things. I think it's really important to find something in the midst of this to get that creative energy going in some direction, so that we don't get stuck in a victim kind of mentality.
Sue's raising her hand. Sue?
I just wanted to add to that. I think that another way that some grief people talk about that is that what we're experiencing is anticipatory grief. Grief of what might still happen, like when someone is in hospice and you're anticipating their death, but now it's like the whole community is anticipating what's going to get worse. And so I find that what's helpful then is to, you know, sort of have that moment of having that worst case scenario, anticipatory grief feeling, and then notice where you are right now and say, but it hasn't happened. I'm here. Here's what I'm looking at. Here's what I'm hearing. Like, here's what's okay. And even if have someone in your life that's hurting or sick, it's not like worst case scenario for the whole world. And so just bring back balance of, you know, what I'm anticipating is not what's happening right now. I'm here. I'm okay. I'm safe.
Yeah. Something else too, like we've said before, this is more than anything a pandemic of fear. And I had meant to say, and I didn't get into that, we need to not put fuel on the fire of the fear. That, and part of that is we need to snooze the news. We need to snooze the dooms and glooms. We need to get our news, we need to get our information from people that we trust and that we trusted before all of this came along, that aren't new on the scene. Or like I asked my friends that I trust, who do you get your news from, you know? But we need to not fuel the fire of the fear too. That's a big important piece, I think.
So Papa Joe, you had a question about SSRI medication. You want to go ahead and ask that?
Yeah. So I do pastoral counseling, and sometimes I suggest the possibility of an SSRI for anxiety, and especially stressful time. And it was really helpful for me a couple of years to be taking Lexapro when I had a lot of stress in the church. And then it was kind of interesting after a couple of years. Actually, my therapist recommended I consider it. So after a couple years, I heard Jesus said, "You don't need to do this anymore." So I stopped. But I asked my therapist. But anyway, so I'm kind of a poster child for Lexapro, which is a generic name, I think. Oh, that anyway. There are other names for it.
I am not a clinician, but I too have taken SSRIs before, and I'm too. I think that they are a very helpful tool. They can be a very helpful tool. So by all means, I mean, we use all of our tools, and we all have different ways and different impacts. And I totally agree. But like I said, I'm not a clinician, so
I'm not either.
Can really speak to that. But I definitely, as a matter of fact, especially when I was dealing with the survivors of the fires and people who had lost everything, or they had been through really significant trauma of surviving, getting through the fires. Boy, I encouraged them to get to a doctor and to get, they needed,
Thank you. I want to have an opportunity just to share one short quote I heard today from Dutch Sheets on a podcast from this week. And he said, the pandemic, how do you say it? Pandemic is not a setback, it's a launch. It's not a setback for the kingdom of God, it's a launch. And that's kind of, I feel that feels true.
Yeah, I totally agree. And part of, I'm really hoping there are many things, and we could do a whole show, I think, on the body of Christ's response and how we can help and work in our churches. I think, but one of the big things that I'm really hoping is going to come out of this in the body of Christ is that we will have a new appreciation for our face-to-face interpersonal fellowship, that we will have a new appreciation for gathering together, that we've gotten where we are meeting so much electronically and so much by phone and so much and presence is so important. That's why a therapy dog is so good. That's why counselors are so good. And like I said, I just think of myself as a therapy dog. I'm just there to love alongside people as they go through something. Presence is so important. And I'm hoping that out of this, there's going to be new home groups. And I'm for the marketplace church too, that those groups are going to spring up over lunch hours in workplaces and over, early workplace, that there's going to be more potlucks and maybe some dances, that we do some serious celebration when we can get back together again. I'm hoping we get back to doing retreats again. I love the gals doing retreats. I am a retreat person, and a retreat's different than a conference. A retreat is a time away with the Lord and with each other. And so that's one of the things, is that I'm hoping this distancing, we're going to come back together after the famine and say, let's feast, let's connect personally with one another.
Yeah, we have a retreat on the books for July 10 to 12, and really hoping that that's going to happen at Lake Tahoe, at Zephyr Point retreat center up there, and really hoping that happens. We actually have another event in Fresno in middle of May. We're not sure if that one's going to be able to happen, but it's been an interesting dynamic where you want to be forward thinking, you want to be planning for the future, but the future is so uncertain. We don't know how long anything's going to take. And so even though you're thinking forward and making plans, there's still this hesitancy. Like we're supposed to do a training in the Emmanuel approach at the Mission Church in Vacaville on the 19th and 20th of June, but we're not sure what it's going to look like. And so we haven't even really started to push that. Because you just don't know. And so that piece of this is driving me nuts.
Yeah.
I'm serious, because I am a planner.
Yeah.
And that piece is making me nuts because I don't know what I can be thinking of at this point. Because like we've got an event in November, so help me, that better happen. It's a long way away. But it's been very difficult. Does anybody else have a question for Susan? Anybody else? Going once? Oh, Kathy?
So I was just, sorry, I'm just working. I'm getting texts here from people as I'm talking, where people are just kind of spinning. You know, they're getting triggered by little things, and then the other person's trying to reach out. And how do I, try not to be offended? And I'm saying, well, just they're stressed, so let's. I'm talking about this right
for each other, yeah.
So at the very beginning, you mentioned like being a part of the healing process. So when you reach out to someone else, does that lower your stress level? Is that a part of our healing? Or are you saying, no, everybody just relax and do what you need to do? Or does it actually help you get out of that anxiety by reaching out, by helping someone else? Because I'm looking at scriptures like, refresh and you will be refreshed. Like that's a biblical principle.
It is a biblical principle. But again, I think it depends on how you're wired. Because I think that there are people that they are wired that way. And so for us, yes. But even for us, because I'm wired that way, definitely. It definitely what gets me going is being able to help other people and reaching out to other people. That definitely is. But at the same time, I've been overwhelmed at times too in the midst of this. I think I've shared before. One night, a couple weeks ago, there was a crisis point in this. And between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. in the morning, I got 21 texts. And included in that were two people that we've been, one person that we've been praying for with the virus that died, had a crisis and died when we thought they were getting better. Another was another death. And another one was the birth of a friend's grandbaby. So, I mean, but I was on overload. We needed to pull out. I cried, Kathy and Belinda. So we need to have those boundaries too. But it depends on how you're wired. Some people need to be pushed a little bit, but other people, no, it's not how they're wired. And so I think we need to not push them. We can challenge, but we need to, some of us health is reaching out and some of us health is pulling in.
Yeah.
And not.
So having grace for whatever you need to do, really.
Exactly.
Grace. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Darla, you had a question? You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, a couple things. I had a friend that is a Honduran friend that I've known for 35 years, and she gave a pep talk or whatever talk yesterday on Zoom or on Facebook, and she said she preached from Psalm 34, and one verse says, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous," and she was saying how it's easy as Christians to go, "Oh, those bad things are happening because God's punishing." We get real black and white, but it says the righteous, and it also says the Lord rescues them out of them all. And yet Paul in 2 Timothy, and I remember this from my mom's funeral when she was 49, or she died at 49. My brother preached that Paul said, you know, that I am being delivered into the lion's mouth, but the Lord will rescue me or whatever. Well, the rescue was death. And so he was rescued by dying. And I'm not saying, you know, that for all this, for the COVID, but my friend, so the rescue is not necessarily that just will be okay. That's all I'm saying, but the Lord will be there. And a friend of mine that's become a Christian at 52, which is a miracle. I mean, I couldn't believe this teacher friend was a Christian, became a Christian just recently. She said, Darla, the worst thing that can happen to me is I'd be dead and with Jesus. And, you know, here's this person that for 30 years of friendship, we disagreed on everything from A to Z, from politics to religion to everything. And the Lord just grabbed her up at 52 and to become a Christian. And so when she's saying that, and she has a lot of influence, she's really different from me. She's a real extrovert. Everybody loves her. And she's like, you know what, Darla, my passion is not teaching pre-K, which she has 34 pre-K people that she has to teach on Zoom every day. I can't even imagine 24 of them, little 4-year-olds that are running around on Zoom. We think our Zoom's bad. But anyway, she goes, my passion is to about health and everything. And so she goes, Darla, if I'm going to throw in a Bible verse, I'm going to throw in Jesus. And if people don't like it, I don't care. And yours is it's just amazing. It's so good. And so all that to say is that we're going to have the afflictions. We're going to have, just like everybody else, it's a whole world. I have friends in the jungles of Bolivia that are locked in. I have friends in South Africa that can't walk their dog. And I have a relative in the Philippines. They're under martial law. And so we're all in it together. And yet the Lord will rescue us all from our affliction.
And Chris Valentin his last few messages have been, humility is the way forward. And we need to remember that even in the midst of, we're confessing and believing, you know, Psalm 91 is one that I have meditated on at night for years. I have a bunch of key passages of scripture that are on my recorder. But some people, it's like with Psalm 91, this is not going to harm us. We're going to be okay. And it's like, we're not going to get this. But there are many believing people that are quoting and believing Psalm 91 that are getting it. And the reality is we're all in this together. And the Lord will deliver us, like you said, out of it all. But it's hard. We want to have faith. We want to believe those promises and have that positive, feed the positive, because the negative just, it feeds the fear. But reality is, yeah, it's affecting us all.
That's really good, Susan. Anybody else have a question? I know some are not on video right now. If you've got something you want to pop in the chat, or if you want to just unmute yourself.
I just wanted to say thank you. This is awesome. Just appreciate your perspective and just knowing that we get to do it. And I love how you say, you know, on the raft analogy was just so good, because we all need to do it differently. So, yeah. And really honoring, like, I'm giving extra grace to myself and giving extra grace to those around, and just giving a lot of love seems to really help. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's such a privilege to do it. And I appreciate your interactions and feedback. Yeah, we're in it together.
Yeah, we're so honored. We're so honored, Susan, to have you and your expertise and your time. And I think what I'm hearing here is that we're all in this together. We need to have grace for everyone to be wherever they are and to do whatever they need to do. And we need to have grace on ourselves to do whatever we need to do, and to not put the high expectations on us right now, because we're all experiencing a trauma. And I love that analogy, or just the clarification, Robert, where you're saying that the A trauma, B trauma, this isn't A trauma. This is an absence. We have had our normal rhythm of life yanked out from underneath us very abruptly. I mean, it's happened very, very quickly. And even now, as there are talks in the governments, both statewide and federally about opening the country back up, that's still a months long process. And I'm already claustrophobic. I'm having to give myself permission to not be super productive. And I'm typically pretty productive, but I have not had motivation to do stuff. I've been really struggling with that. And it is nice to get out of my own head sometimes and do what I'm created to do. We've been seeing clients, doing one-on-one ministry appointments, and have been doing these Zoom calls over the past month. We don't have any more officially scheduled at this point. A few people have been consistent to drop in on the Monday one, and Fridays have been a little bit better, but we may not do it as regularly, but still do it, because I think there is still a big need for connection during this time. And I think more than ever, we need each other. This is a human thing. This is a human event. And we don't in any way want to minimize what people are walking through who are being affected directly. I can't even imagine the trauma of not being able to be with your loved one in the hospital and having them die alone. I cannot even imagine the trauma that people are having to walk who are directly affected in the statistics of this disease. And so we definitely, yes, Kathy, there are no easy answers. We do have to trust the Lord in this. And is there anything you want to wrap up with, Susan? If anybody has a question, now's your time. And if not, Susan, do you have any closing remarks you want to?
I just would like to do a closing prayer, maybe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Father, I thank you, Jesus, that you slept in the boat because you knew you were going to the other side. And so, Lord, I pray for each one here. I know a lot of times during my traumas, I'm yelling at you, Jesus, wake up, wake up, wake up, and stop this storm. But you have a confidence, and I ask, Lord, that each one of us would be able to draw near to you, that you would speak to us, and that you would empower us and give us the grace that we need. And we thank you, Lord, for the good things that are lying ahead in the midst of this, and that all of us will be stronger, healthier, and more impactful for your kingdom at the end of this thing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah. And Papa Joe, I think you wanted to just, I'm researching for you guys to send you a link here. N.T. Wright, you guys know him, the former Archbishop of Canterbury. He's in Oxford, England, theologian. He wrote several books. But N.T. Wright, there's a podcast called Ask N.T. Wright Anything, and there's a episode that he did recently on Christians and the coronavirus. I'm looking for that link to post in the chat before we end the call. And again, if you want to save the chat, there's 3 little dots inside a box down in the chat window. You can save it. But he has some really good insight. What's that? Oh. There's some really good insight from him as a theologian on this. And one of the things that he said, and y'all probably read in the chat, that Sue has had 3 deaths in her extended family, and the fact that it's so hard to not be able to gather together in grief. And one of the things that he said is that we're going to have a lot of displaced and delayed grief that's going to bite everybody in the butt one of these days, because they can't deal with it now because of the fact that they're not being allowed to grieve together. They're not being allowed to really work through and have closure. And so that's a big deal. Can you look up that on YouTube? That is a really big deal. And I think, for us as a ministry, this is what we're called to do, is to help people connect with Jesus and find him in their place of trauma and bring healing. And I feel like God's really positioning the heart healers and the counselors, that they're being positioned because we're all going to need some help. I think the influx of people who are going to be seeking help emotionally and mentally, I have said from the beginning of this that the emotional and mental turmoil of this is going to outlast, take longer to heal, because those wounds are inside. They're not like a broken leg. They're not like being in a hospital bed. They're internal, and so they're not seen. And so giving people space to actually deal with what they're feeling and process that pain in a healthy way. A lot of people are going to need a lot of help. And so that's what we're called to as a ministry, to raise up people who can help people, and also providing that one-on-one as well. Yeah, I think Darla has posted it. Melinda's posted it. It's a really excellent 34-minute podcast episode transferred to YouTube, but y'all take a listen to that. I think it might be helpful. And Papa Joe, I adore you. You're one of my favorite people. I love you so much. And you want to just pray us out, bless us with a Father's blessing.
Yeah, I'll give a Father's blessing, and also that it's the Aaronic blessing from Numbers. The Lord bless you and keep you. That's in that song, the blessing.
Yes. Yeah.
The Lord bless you, Melinda, and keep you. And the Lord bless you, Kathy. Make his face to shine upon you, be gracious to you. And the Lord bless you, Robert and Juliet, and protect you. Show you his favor. The Lord bless you, Sue. You, he wants to bless you, Sue. And keep you safe. The Lord bless you, Susan, with favor. Make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord bless you, Brenda. The Lord turn his face toward you. He can't keep his eyes off you, and is smiling on you. And the Lord bless you, Kathy. Bless you with shalom, peace. And Darla, the Lord bless you. Cosette, did I get your name right? Okay. The Lord bless you, Darla, and keep you. The Lord bless you and keep you safe. And all that you love, keep them safe and hold in your heart. The Lord bless you, Kim. He loves to love you. Show you his favor. You are his favorite, and you are special to him. And the Lord bless you, Lemura. He really loves you. And I bless you all with the Father's blessing. Receive now Daddy's love. Be blessed by the love of the Father. Bless your heart with the Father's love. He says, I love you. You're my daughter. You're my son. And I love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Yeah. Amen. Wow. Yeah. Whoa, was that sweet? Yeah.
Thank you.
We want to extend that. There's a few people that are not on video here, and so we do extend that to Rick and to Patrice and Mary Esther and Patty and Christine as well. May you also receive the blessing. And thank you guys for being part of this. This is our first push out with a guest speaker, and we're just so honored that you all have given your time to be here, and we hope it's been helpful. There's been some resources posted in the chat. We have the Peace Kit on our website. You can just go to our homepage, face2faceministries.org, no spaces, no numbers, no caps, face2faceministries.org, and right on the homepage there is the Peace Kit button. You can pop in there. There's that blessing song that Papa Joe just referenced by Carrie Job is in there. There's a short video on just some breathing, rhythmic breathing. Dr. Jim Wilder with Shalom for My Body, how to bring yourself to a place of quiet from emotions that are not desired. And a 30-day brain reset for just wiring your brain toward joy and appreciation. Just some discipline, little simple things to help you bring your self from the fear center up into the front to experience joy. So those are all there for you, and they're all free. Just go in there and pop in. And thank you guys. Thanks for being part of this. And we'd love for you to, just come back. We'll do this again one day and see what God wants to do next time. So, anything else? We're good to go. We can say.
Let me just say that they can hear me.
Yeah.
if this was helpful, please let us know. We'll
Yeah,
pass
let
any
us know.
messages on to Susan. I know some people are as quick to process and thinking about things you want to share later, but also if you would like, if you feel like it would be helpful to do something again like this, it's not like we're never going to do this again. It's just not the regularity, but there's other guests that we could have on that specialize in different things. And I'm already thinking of several people.
Yeah.
And so just
Yeah.
asking the Lord about
I think
that.
we
But
might do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rebecca.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, we're going to do this again.
We're going to
Good.
watch this space.
Yeah, please make sure you are on our Facebook page, Face to Face Ministries on Facebook. And thanks for being here, y'all. We're going to call it at 6:30. We did it perfect. Susan, thank you so much. And Susan and Sue, y'all need to connect. Y'all do that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'll if I need to, I can help with that. But I just want to make sure you guys are. I think that was that's a good connection. So anyway, love you guys. Thank you so much for being part of this, and we will sign off until next time. Be safe and be well, everybody.
You too.
You're gonna.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see you guys later.
Love all of y'all, even if I've never met you.